My name is Aukelien van Abema, difficult Dutch name, and I'm a psychologist and I have my own private practice as a couples counsellor and as a what we call in the Netherlands GZ-psycholoog. So I've been asked to speak on relationships and marriage and the impact of COVID on marriage. From research, what we know is that it's complicated. The impact of COVID on marriages is there's both negatives and there's positives. So what we see is, and this research has been done in several countries, that the bad stuff obviously was financial stress for a lot of people over losing their jobs, losing their income, and having little children. Because having little children means you were very much impacted in how you could perform your job, if you could do it. Having little children home all the time obviously makes it harder to get your work done and put stress on the relationship. So these are the two big factors impacting marriages during COVID. The good thing that happened was that travel got banned, and for a lot of people that meant they had to stop commuting and they could just work from home. And obviously, for a lot of people that was absolutely fine. They didn't miss the commute at all, and it saved them energy and time and money. And they could be at home more, which was a positive. For us, for example, my husband normally travels about 8 weeks a year, and now because he couldn't travel, he was home all the time. And having 3 children under 6, that was very much a good thing for us. But if you look here in the Netherlands or in Europe, what we see is it was beneficial to some and it was bad for others. So what was beneficial, I think, for a lot of couples was that, especially husbands who used to work 5 days a week and have a long commute, were now home all the time. So they could contribute more, and it was also for their own well-being that they felt better about that. And they didn't lose as much energy traveling to work and back. But if your relationship, and this is where it gets tricky, if your relationship was already under stress because of communication patterns, then these communication patterns probably worsened for a lot of couples. And what we mean by communication patterns in couples counseling, what we talk about is people are either prone to fighting more or to withdrawing more. And you can imagine, you can be, if you're both more the fighting type, the clashes get more intense, get bigger when you're home all the time. And if you don't have a good way of getting back together, connecting back together, if you don't have a proper way of working your way through those clashes, then this can lead to massive problems, especially when you're home all the time and confronted with each other all the time. If you have more of a withdrawing pattern, both of you, then that also gets worse when you're both at home all the time, because then you miss out on each other while you're in the same space, which can feel really lonely and really complicated for a lot of couples. So if one of you is the withdrawer, and this is the pattern we see the most, one of you is the withdrawer and the other one is the fighter, you can imagine that also causes issues. Because the one who picks the fights is actually the one seeking the connection in a rather intense way, whereas the one who's the withdrawer is more of the person who wants to keep the peace and the harmony and wants to save the relationship in his or her own way. So the patterns we see during COVID were probably a bit more intense than they normally would have been. So if there was already an underlying problem, it's quite possible that during COVID, especially I think in the second and third lockdowns we had, were more visible. Because during the first lockdown, I think most people were in a sort of mindset of survival and looking for the positives and enjoying their peace and the rest and the break from their normal social activities. So the first 3 months of COVID were stressful, but probably leading to a lot of good things. Whereas when it was prolonged and our nervous systems were actually depleted and we're all sort of tired from adjusting to this completely new situation, that was when for a lot of couples the real issues began, and that's what I saw in my practice as well. And well, the big question is probably for a lot of people, how do we get out of these negative patterns? The good news is that it's highly doable. You probably have to find yourself a good couples counsellor, but you have to figure out, am I more of a withdrawer, am I more of a fighter, and how can I connect to my partner in a way that works for both of us? How can I accept my own way of connecting, and also what's underneath my need to pick a fight or my need to withdraw? Is there childhood trauma, which there often is. If people have a very extreme tendency to withdraw or an extreme tendency to fight, there often is an underlying childhood trauma issue or relationship trauma issue that acts out in the current relationship, but doesn't necessarily mean you're in a bad relationship. You can be in a very good and safe and loving relationship and still fight and still not figure out how to get through those fights together. So I think that's the good news. It's highly doable to learn new patterns and to learn how to feel safe with your partner again or for the first time.